I still don't know why I said yes. It was a last-minute invite, and I'd already told myself I wasn't going. My coworker was throwing a little get-together for his birthday. Nothing crazy, just drinks, a bonfire, a few people from the office. The kind of social event I usually avoided like the plague. But then he texted me again, last minute. Hey, you should come for real. I think you'll like the vibe. And I don't know. I just had one of those nights where sitting alone in my apartment felt heavier than usual. So I went. It was one of those houses that's technically in the city, but feels like you've crossed into another time zone. Big, old, tucked behind trees with a backyard that just kept going. The fire pit was already going when I got there, a few people holding solo cups, laughing at something I missed. I kept my hands in my pockets and tried not to feel completely out of place. I didn't know anyone besides Mark, the birthday guy, and he was already a few drinks in, hugging everyone like he was at his own wedding. He clapped a hand on my shoulder when he saw me. "Holy shit, you actually came." "Yeah," I said, smiling even though I wasn't fully relaxed yet. "Surprise." He handed me a beer and leaned in, like he was about to tell me a secret. "Okay, listen, my cousin's here. He just moved to town. I think you two would get along." I tried not to roll my eyes. "You're setting me up?" "I'm just saying." He grinned. "He's smart, sarcastic, and taller than you. So, your type." I laughed and took the beer. "I don't have a type." He gave me a look. "You definitely do." I shook my head and turned toward the fire, letting the warmth hit me. It was early fall, one of those nights where the air is crisp enough to see your breath, but not cold enough for gloves. The kind of weather that makes you feel a little more alive. That's when I saw him, or rather felt him, the guy Mark must have met. He was sitting on one of those folding camping chairs, legs stretched out, beanie pulled low over messy dark hair. Tall, like Mark said, with that kind of loose posture that made him look either extremely confident or just extremely comfortable. And then he looked up. We made eye contact for maybe half a second, but it was enough. I looked away first, always do. A few minutes later, he was standing next to me, holding a beer, wearing a faint smirk like he'd already made a decision about me. "You're the guy Mark said might show up," he said, nodding toward the house. "That obvious?" He shrugged. "You've got that vibe." I raised an eyebrow. "What vibe? New guy at the party. Doesn't really want to be here. Standing just far enough from the fire to look mysterious, but not far enough to freeze." I laughed. "Wow. Got me pegged." He smiled. "Not yet." I choked on my beer a little, which only made him grin wider. "Sorry," he added, not sounding sorry at all. "That was fast." "I've heard worse." We stood there for a second. Quiet except for the crackle of the fire and the soft hum of conversation behind us. "I'm Wes," he said eventually, holding out a hand. I shook it. "Eli." "Cool name. Thanks. Yours is aggressively chill," he laughed. "Aggressively chill. That's a new one." The silence after that wasn't awkward. It just hung there, warm and open. "Mark said you just moved here?" I asked. "Yeah, a couple weeks ago. Staying with him while I get my shit together." "What's your deal?" he grinned. "My deal? You know, what do you do?" "Used to work in film production," he said. "Set design. Then COVID hit, and everything kind of fell apart. Been freelancing, bouncing around. Figured I'd try a new city." "Big move." "Big risk," he said. "But I like it so far. People are," he looked at me, "interesting." I looked away, smiling in spite of myself. We talked for another hour. About nothing and everything. Somehow we ended up sitting on the ground near the fire, knees almost touching, trading stories like old friends. He told me about a haunted motel he accidentally booked in Utah. I told him about the time I got locked inside a Target after closing. And when I finally stood up to leave, he stood too. "You heading out?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Early morning." He looked at me for a second like he wanted to say something else. Then, can I walk you out? Sure. It wasn't a long walk to the street, but it felt like a moment. And when we got to my car, he leaned against the door, hands in his pockets. Hey, he said. Yeah? I don't usually do this on night one. I raised an eyebrow. But I'm gonna be around. And I think I want to know you. I swallowed. You've got a weird way of saying you want my number. He grinned. Guilty. I handed him my phone. He typed it in. Then, before I could overthink it, he stepped forward and kissed me. Just a quick press of lips. Light, warm, testing. Then he pulled back and said, Good night, Eli. I watched him walk back toward the house, heart beating too loud in my ears. And in the car, alone, I just sat there for a minute, wondering what the hell just happened. But knowing, deep down, I'd see him again. Wes texted me the next morning. It was early, like 8:17 a.m. early, which made me wonder if he was always that much of a morning person or just trying to catch me off guard. Wes, so what are the chances you're also hungover and thinking about last night? I wasn't hungover, but I was definitely thinking about him. Me. Low on hangover, high on the second part. Wes. Good. I've got a free afternoon and a craving for something greasy. You in? Me. Are you inviting me to get greasy with you? Wes. Absolutely. 1 p.m. I'll send the address. We met at this old-school diner on the east side. Vinyl booths, checkered floors, a jukebox that mostly worked, and a waitress named Darlene, who probably had psychic powers. Wes was already at a booth when I got there, sipping a milkshake like he'd been born in a movie. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. Hey, city boy, he said. I sat across from him. Hey, beanie guy. He slid a menu toward me. They've got a burger here that'll end you in the best way. Sounds romantic, he smirked. It could be. The thing about Wes was, he didn't flirt the way most guys do. He didn't lay it on thick or make it a performance. He just had this way of looking at you like you were the most interesting thing in the room. And when he asked you something, anything, it felt like he actually cared what the answer was. So, he said, picking at a fry, What's your story? I raised an eyebrow. That broad, huh? Yeah, give me the medium deep cut, I thought for a second. I'm 28, graphic designer. Pretty good at it, not amazing. Live alone. Hate folding laundry. I'm not great at dating, but I'm trying to be better at showing up. You? He nodded slowly, like he was cataloging each word. I'm 29. Still figuring out what I want to be when I grow up. I'm good at building things. Terrible at talking about my feelings. Not bad at dating, but I tend to pick people who don't know what they want. I looked at him for a beat. That's pretty real for a second date. You calling this a date? He asked, smiling around the straw in his milkshake. I don't know, are you? He shrugged. I invited you to a greasy diner and paid for your heart attack burger. I think that qualifies. I smiled, trying not to let it show how much that simple line warmed me. After lunch, we walked to his car, a beat-up gray Subaru with a surfboard in the back and about 1,000 parking tickets on the dash. He leaned against the driver's side and said, You want to hang out for a bit? I don't have plans. We ended up at this quiet little park a few blocks away, sitting on a bench under one of those half-dead trees that drop leaves like confetti this time of year. He tossed a pebble between his fingers as we talked. Can I ask you something? He said after a pause. Sure. When's the last time you had something real? I looked down at the ground. Like, relationship real? Yeah, like someone who knew your shit and didn't run. I hesitated. Been a while, I said. Maybe ever. He nodded. Same. The air between us went still for a second. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. Wes turned toward me slightly. I'm not trying to move fast, by the way. I just don't want to pretend I'm not into you. I blinked. You're just gonna say it like that? He grinned. Yeah. Radical concept, huh? Honesty. I laughed under my breath. Wild. Then he nudged me with his elbow. You don't have to say it back. Just know it. We didn't kiss that day, not even when we hugged goodbye. but his hand lingered on my shoulder a little longer than it needed to. And when I got home, I realized I was smiling for no reason. He texted me that night. "Wes, you've got one of those faces that sticks with you." Me, "What kind of face is that?" "Wes, the kind that makes you want to do it right." I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Me, "You're not what I expected." Wes, "Is that good or bad?" Me, "Very good." That night, I lay in bed thinking about how fast things were shifting, how natural it felt, and how rare that was. Something was starting, and I didn't feel like running from it. The third time I saw Wes, it was raining. Not a dramatic thunderstorm or anything, just that steady, annoying drizzle that makes everything damp but never quite forces you inside. He texted me out of nowhere. "Wes, you ever just want to sit on a porch and watch the rain like an old man?" Me, literally all the time. "Wes, come over. I got beers and a covered porch. Wear a hoodie." I pulled up to Mark's place around 6. Wes met me on the front steps, barefoot, hoodie on, beer already in hand. His hair was wet at the ends, curls sticking out from under his beanie. "I brought backup," I said, holding up a 6-pack. He grinned. "You read my mind." We sat in mismatched chairs on the porch, legs stretched out, beer bottles sweating between our palms. The rain fell in that soft, endless kind of way, like background noise your brain doesn't have to work to enjoy. For a while, we didn't talk, just watched the rain, the way it slid down the street, pooling in little gutters, hitting leaves with soft taps. Then Wes said, "I used to do this with my dad, sit outside when it rained. He'd say it was the only time the world shut up enough to think." I glanced over. "You too close?" He nodded, slow. "We were." He passed a few years back. "I'm sorry." "Yeah," he said quietly. "It sucked." We didn't say anything for a while after that, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like holding something between us, gently. Wes turned to me. "You okay with quiet?" I looked at him. I like the quiet. His smile was small but real. Most people don't. Most people talk just to fill space. He looked at me for a long second. "You don't," I shrugged. "Takes too much energy." Another beat passed. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I'm glad you texted." He shifted in his chair, turning a little toward me. "I keep thinking I'm gonna freak you out." "Why?" "Because I'm not subtle," he said. "And I like you, which is a lot for me this fast." I met his eyes. "I like you too." There it was again. That look. The one he gave like he was trying to memorize the way you looked at him when you said something true. "I was gonna wait," he said. "But can I kiss you again?" I didn't answer with words. I leaned in. This kiss was different from the first. Longer. Slower. Less about surprise. More about intention. It tasted like beer and rain and something I hadn't had in a long time. Quiet certainty. When we pulled back, he didn't move far. Just rested his forehead against mine. "You make it hard to take this slow," he said, voice low. "Then don't." He blinked, surprised. "I'm not scared of you, Wes." He let out a slow breath. That might be the sexiest thing anyone's ever said to me. We sat like that, knees touching, breath sinking. Then the rain got heavier. And Wes stood, held out a hand and said, "Come inside." I followed. His room was small but warm, half lit by a soft bedside lamp. The kind of space that smelled like laundry and cedar soap. He didn't say anything as I took off my wet hoodie, just watched me, his gaze soft. We didn't do anything that night. Not really. We lay on his bed, fully clothed, tangled in each other, his arm around my waist, my head on his chest. He played with my fingers absent-mindedly while we listened to the rain hammer the roof. "I could stay like this forever," he murmured. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought the same thing. Not because it was exciting, but because it was calm, safe. And maybe the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone inside my own skin. I didn't sleep at Wes's that night. I probably could have. Probably should have. But something about how quiet and good it felt made me nervous. Not in a bad way. Just in that this is starting to mean something kind of way. So I left around midnight after he walked me to my car barefoot and kissed me like he meant it. He texted me the second I got home. Wes, already wish you'd stayed. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before replying. Me too, next time. He sent back a smiley face, just the simple one, not the flirty kind. The kind you send when your heart's a little too full and you don't know how else to say it. The next few days were a blur of texts, voice notes, and stolen hours between work. We didn't see each other until that Friday. I had a deadline, he was helping Mark move some furniture, but we kept finding ways to stay in orbit. He sent me a picture of his lunch one day, some tragic gas station sandwich, and asked if I'd teach him how to not eat like a construction worker. I sent him back a photo of my sad desk salad and told him I was in no position to judge. When Friday finally rolled around, he asked if I wanted to come over for dinner. Don't get excited, he said. I'm not a good cook. I just like the idea of feeding you. How do you say no to that? I showed up around 6:30. The front door was open, and he yelled from inside, "Come in unless you're a murderer." Just mildly stabby, I called back. He grinned from the kitchen. Perfect. I like a little danger with my pasta. The place smelled like garlic and something slightly burnt. He had a bottle of red open on the counter, a pot of something bubbling, and a Spotify playlist humming in the background. Indie stuff, mellow, warm. You cook like you live, I said, watching him juggle a pan with one hand and swipe a recipe on his phone with the other. Chaotic and hopeful. That sounds like a compliment, he said. It is, barely. We sat down on the couch to eat, balancing our bowls on our knees. It wasn't fancy, just spaghetti with some kind of improvised meat sauce, but it tasted good. Maybe because he made it. Maybe because I was there. After dinner, we didn't move far, just shifted sideways, ended up with me lying across the couch, my head on his thigh, his fingers absently running through my hair. It was quiet for a while, just music and the sound of his thumb tracing the curve of my ear. Then he said, I've been thinking about something. I opened one eye. Dangerous. He smiled but didn't laugh. I know it's early, and we don't have to define anything yet, but I want to keep seeing you. Like intentionally. Not just, let's hang and see where it goes. I want it to go somewhere. With you. I sat up slowly. His face was calm, but his knee was bouncing slightly, like he was nervous underneath it all. I reached out, rested a hand on his leg. That doesn't scare me. His knee stopped. You're not just saying that? I'm not the guy who says things I don't mean, I said. He exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath all week. We didn't call it anything. No boyfriend talk. No big romantic declarations. But something had shifted. That night, I did stay. We didn't rush anything. Just changed into soft clothes and curled up under his old blanket, watching some documentary about a guy who trained pigeons to recognize paintings. Around midnight, I brushed my teeth with one of his spare toothbrushes. He kissed my temple and said, "This feels too easy." And I said, "Maybe it's supposed to." We fell asleep, tangled up on his bed. Limbs loose, breath slow. I remember the last thing he said before drifting off was, "I haven't slept this well in years." And the last thing I felt was his hand tightening slightly around mine, under the covers. Like he was making sure I didn't disappear. I woke up first, not because of any alarm or noise. Just one of those rare mornings where your body decides it's time. The room was dim, only a sliver of morning light creeping through the blinds. Wes was still asleep, mouth slightly open, one arm flung across my stomach like he'd claimed the territory overnight. I stayed still. Not because I didn't want to move, but because I didn't want to break the moment. It was quiet. Soft. The kind of morning that made you feel like the world had paused just for you. He shifted a little, letting out a sleepy breath, and pulled me closer like his body knew what it wanted, even if his mind was still asleep. And I just lay there, watching the light shift across the wall, thinking about how different this felt. It wasn't about fireworks or butterflies, it was about safety. Later, when he woke up, it was slow. He blinked up at me, confused for a second, then smiled. One of those crooked, half-awake smiles that made my chest feel tight in the best way. "Hey," he mumbled. "Morning," I whispered. He looked around like he was checking to make sure it wasn't a dream. Then, softly, "You stayed." I nodded. "I said I would." He kissed my shoulder. "Good." We stayed in bed longer than we probably should have, talking about nothing. I learned he sleeps cold and hates mornings. He learned I sleep on my side unless I'm sharing a bed. Then I always end up facing the other person, like I'm afraid they'll vanish in the night. He teased me for that, but he didn't let go. Around 10, we finally pulled ourselves out of bed and wandered into the kitchen in our boxers. I made coffee, he made toast. It felt like playing house, in the best way. "Want to do something today?" he asked, slathering too much butter on a slice of bread. "Like what?" "I don't know. Something outside." "You, Mr. Indoors, want to go outside?" He grinned. "I want to go somewhere with you. That counts." We ended up at a nearby trail. Nothing intense. Just a loop through some woods behind the university. He wore joggers and a hoodie. I wore jeans and regretted it within 10 minutes. But it was nice. We talked the whole time. About music, dumb movies we liked, our worst first dates. He told me about a guy who brought his mom to dinner once. I told him about the guy who asked me to rate his abs in the middle of a bar. At one point, we passed an older couple walking hand in hand, and Wes said, "Think we'll end up like that?" "Old and creaky," he nudged me. "No," holding hands in the woods. "Still trying." I didn't answer right away, just looked at him. "I hope so," I said. We finished the loop, grabbed iced coffees, and sat on the curb outside the cafe, sipping in the weak autumn sun. He glanced at me over his lid. "You think this is moving fast?" "Maybe," I said, "but it doesn't feel wrong." He nodded, thoughtful. "Yeah, that's the weird part. I keep waiting for it to feel too much, but it just feels right." I smiled. "Same." He reached over and rested his hand on my knee. Not dramatic, not possessive, just there. And I knew, right then, this wasn't just a fling. It was the start of something real. That night, he came over to my place for the first time. I'd cleaned like I was hosting royalty, which felt stupid once he walked in and immediately kicked off his shoes and dropped onto the couch like he'd lived there for years. "This is very you," he said, glancing around. "What does that mean?" He shrugged, grinning. "Clean, calm, and full of books you probably haven't finished." I threw a pillow at him. He caught it and leaned back. "I like it here." We ordered Thai food, watched a dumb horror movie neither of us could take seriously, and ended up on the floor with a blanket and a half-finished bottle of wine. The kind of night where everything just slows down without trying to be anything. He leaned his head on my shoulder about halfway through the movie and whispered, "You smell good." I turned to him. "You waited 2 hours to say that?" I was trying not to be creepy. "You're failing." He smiled. "You're letting me, though." I didn't say anything, just tilted my head, kissed him slowly, and let it linger. Something about kissing him felt different every time, like layers were peeling away. Less flirt, more feeling. We made out on the floor like teenagers. Slow, messy, unhurried. His hand slipped under my shirt at one point, just resting on my side, not even moving. It was so soft, like he wasn't trying to get anywhere, just to stay close. Eventually, I pulled back, breathless. He looked at me. "You okay?" "Yeah, I just don't want to rush this." He nodded. "Me neither." So we didn't. We moved to the bed, fully clothed, and lay there in the dark. He curled against me, arm across my chest, nose tucked into my neck like he needed the contact. I ran my fingers through his hair until his breathing evened out. I didn't fall asleep for a while. Not because I was nervous, but because I couldn't stop thinking about how easy this was. How good it felt to share space with someone without needing to perform. How rare that was. He stayed the whole weekend. We made pancakes Saturday morning, burned the first batch, ate the second in bed. He helped me grocery shop like we'd been doing it together for years, debating cereal brands, sneaking chocolate into the cart when he thought I wasn't looking. We didn't do anything groundbreaking. No big dates. No dramatic confessions. But that weekend felt more intimate than anything I'd had in years. Sunday night, when he packed up to head home, he stood by the door like he didn't want to move. "I don't really want to go," he said. "So don't." He hesitated. "You'd let me stay again." I walked over, looped my arms around his waist, and said, "Wes, you're allowed to take up space in my life." He didn't say anything right away, just leaned in and kissed me. Long, firm. Then he pulled back and said, "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." And I watched him leave, knowing it wouldn't be long before he was back. The next week settled into something that felt dangerously close to routine. He'd come over a few nights a week, sometimes staying, sometimes just dropping by for dinner or a walk. I'd leave little things at his place: socks, my favorite mug, a book I swore I'd get back but secretly hoped he'd read. He started calling me casually, like it had always been my name. One night, we were lying on the couch after a particularly bad movie and even worse takeout. His legs were tangled with mine, head on my chest, his hand absent-mindedly tracing the seam of my shirt. Out of nowhere, he said, "Hey, can I ask you something real? Only if I can give you a fake answer." He smiled, but didn't laugh, just looked up at me. "Do you see this going somewhere?" It didn't feel like a trap, just a question, but one I could tell he'd been holding for a while. I sat up a little. "Yeah, I do." He nodded, quiet. "I keep waiting to mess it up." "You haven't," I said. "Yet." I took his hand. "Wes, you're not a project. You don't have to prove anything." He looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw it. Fear. Real bone-deep fear that this thing we had might actually matter, and that he didn't know what to do with that. "You scare me," he said quietly. "Why?" "Because this feels good. Too good. And I don't know what I'm doing." I reached up, brushed a hand through his hair. "That makes two of us." He let out a slow breath. "I don't want to lose you." "Then don't." He leaned in, kissed me soft, then rested his forehead against mine. "Will you stay tonight?" he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." We didn't talk about love. Not that night. But we didn't need to. The words were there, tucked into the way he brought me tea without asking, the way he kissed my shoulder in the morning before I was even awake, the way his hand always found mine under the covers. It was there when he asked if I wanted to go with him to visit his mom 2 towns over. It was there when I caught him folding my laundry without being asked. It was there in the small stuff. And a few weeks later, it finally came out. We were walking home from a bar, nothing fancy, just beers and a couple of friends. And he was a little buzzed, looser than usual, arm around my shoulders. We stopped at a corner, waiting for the light to change, and he looked over at me, and he said it. "I think I'm falling in love with you." No warning, no build-up, just like that. I stared at him, heart thudding, not because I didn't feel it, but because I did. Completely. Fully. Maybe before he'd even realized it. I took his face in my hands and said, "You're not alone." He blinked. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," I said. "It's the biggest yes I've ever felt." And then I kissed him in the middle of the sidewalk under a flickering street lamp while cars passed and the world kept moving. But for us, it felt like it paused, like we'd arrived at something. Not the end, but a beginning.